Welcome to DivTech 101, aka Black Mantle, as we discuss information technology, also known as IT. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about safeguarding your digital world, a dive into cybersecurity and data privacy.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Now, when we're looking at this topic, what I want to make sure that I do and what you take away from this is at least learning what cybersecurity is and what data privacy is. And it's extremely important that you are able to protect your personal information, especially in the interconnected world that we have with IoT, aka Internet of Things devices, where everything is connected and how we can protect that kind of information. Now, when you're looking at cybersecurity, there's a couple of things that you want to understand about cybersecurity as well as its significance in the digital landscape. While cybersecurity started to surface around about 2008, it was still very new, not too many people in the industry. But from 2008 to about 2023, if you looked on a graph, you would definitely see an interest and the chart and everything of how cybersecurity has grown so much and why organizations are really paying attention more now than ever because of the different kind of threats and things that we have. Now, there are many different types of threats that organizations will face. If you're new into IT, you're going to start learning about this, or you may have had a first-hand experience on it. But if you're a veteran in IT, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So most of us are all too familiar with viruses. And viruses on your computer are pretty much on a basic level programs that make your computer do things that it should not, and exposing your system to things and programs that make your system do bad and terrible things. Now, try not to get extremely too technical, but I also want to make sure that the information is easily understood, so that way, if you ever need to go back and research this, you'll know kind of what to look for. Now, there's many different types of vulnerabilities that are out there. As I mentioned a moment ago, you have your viruses, and you also have your ransomware. And think of a ransomware as like someone taking your system hostage and they're forcing you to pay that out where they may get a lump sum of money from you, and in return, supposedly, they would give you your system back. Not always the case. Most of you have heard of ransomware at some point in time in organizations, whether your organization has been attacked or it has not yet, but it's only a matter of time before an organization gets something as such. When you're looking at spyware, you're basically looking at programs that do the following. So, when we're looking at spyware, you're looking at programs that are installed on the computer or a mobile device, and they basically report activity back to the intruder. So, the intruder is beginning to learn what you are doing on that computer so they can take better control of it. That is pretty much what all of spyware is in that regard. And those three, from viruses to ransomware to spyware, all fall under the umbrella of malware. Now, when you look at phishing, and I don't mean phishing is going out to the lake and fishing for fish out there, but phishing is basically a deceptive technique that is used to steal sensitive information. So it may look as if it's something real and legit from a reputable source. However, once you realize that you have clicked into something that was not legit, you've already given up the necessary information that that person was trying to find, and they will use that against you to take control of your system. Now, when you're thinking about social engineering, social engineering is going to happen multiple ways. But overall, social engineering has to do with highlighting the manipulation tactics that are used by these cyber actors who want to exploit human vulnerabilities. So these group of people, whether it's a person or a group of people, will go out and purposely find organizations to try and find the breach in their security and then exposing that security through social means, aka social engineering. And a lot of these different topics, they pretty much have a self explanatory way of explaining it to themselves, if you really look at them from that way. But there are, you can just Google search most of the real world examples of cyber attacks and their impacts on individuals' lives. But when you are the person on the receiving end of that and you experience a attack, it's almost like being out somewhere in the world and having your wallet or your purse stolen. Somebody takes everything that you've worked so hard for and they use it against you or use it and you don't even know it. And what's worse is when companies have no idea that a cyber threat exists within their organization until it's months down the line. Now, when we're looking at protection and data privacy, and I studied this in school and very familiar with it, and I'm glad that the world is getting more towards this. But when you're looking at data privacy, don't think of it as your right to privacy. I mean, everybody always says that as the overarching statement. That is above the iceberg. What we want to look at is beneath the iceberg. We want to look at how can we protect our privacy? What are some things that we can do, and why does it matter so much? Because we live in a world where there's cameras everywhere, and cameras everywhere record everything. So what we have are potential risk of someone taking that personal data and misusing that by any means necessary. And that can be anything from identity theft, it can be data profiling, it can be, third parties that you share information with, sharing it to different people. But just to kind of go a little bit deeper into those three, when you're looking at identity management, what you want to look at is you want to look at the consequences of stolen personal information. So that's basically someone who is taking your information without your written or express consent. Because sometimes if you don't opt out of it, you're giving them consent to actually use that information to be shared with third parties. Because information is having to be shared for marketing purposes, and the you don't always get to choose whether or not that data is going to be shared because it's going to be shared at some point. I mean, that's how you get coupons and things like that in the mail based on what you like because if you filled out a survey on some site, giving the permission or express consent to do so. So keep that in mind. But when you have that kind of identity theft happen, what begins to happen is once that data is collected, then that data is used for targeted advertising. So if you ever notice that you could be talking about something and then your phone would show you on YouTube that specific item. So if you're looking for a particular brand of soap, you may start seeing soap ads throughout your browser. And that is called data profiling because companies are using that in order to find information like that, data warehouses. One example is if you look at the company Axiom. Axiom is a fairly big provider who they actually store information, and the way that you can link information is like with that company you can figure out just through sorting through the data and configuring things right on how many left-hand golfers that may live in the state of Texas, for example. Let's just throw that one out there. Um, there's like so much data that's in there that you're able to coordinate the necessary pieces of data that you want in order to create that data profile. Now, once that profiling has taken place and everything, and this doesn't have to happen in chronological order, but you have third party data sharing, and those right there is talking about the implications of companies sharing that user information. So, for example, if you filled out a survey for Walmart in the store, about a product that you want to use? How do you know that Walmart is not sharing that with an advertising agency for that product that you're using? So that way they're able to send you coupons, send you updates about that particular item. Third party data sharing is going to happen whether you express consent or not. It's going to happen. But when you look at the whole overarching aspect of protecting your data and privacy, if you're putting it on the computer, it's going to get exposed. If you're not putting it on the computer, you have a higher chance of your data not being not only stolen, you won't have to worry about data profiling, you won't have to worry about third party data sharing. People who normally do this are people who actually, what they say, go off the grid. They don't want any kind of cellular device or mobile device or computer around them recording information. So they are going to therefore be kind of self opted out of those particular kinds of situations. Now, even though we talked a little bit about and trying to understand cybersecurity and how to protect your information, we also want to look at the essentials of cybersecurity itself and different kinds of privacy measures that happen and that are in place. But there are different things that you can use, tips that you can use to help enhance your cybersecurity, not only for your organization, but personally and also for data privacy. Well, the first thing that you can do is use a strong password. And I've talked about this plenty of times, but the importance of using unique and complex passwords is a must. By all means necessary, do not, under any circumstances, write your password down in a binder or write your password on a sticky note, sticking under the keyboard. I've seen this happen, and I honestly, if I see that, I throw passwords away because people have a hard time remembering strong passwords, but they need to be more than 8 characters long. I would say probably minimum 12 to 16 characters, and if you can, 16 would be 16 plus would be great. But they definitely need to be unique. It doesn't need to be anything easily guessed, just letters or numbers only, but maybe some special characters as well. So you can just play around with it. There's a couple tools out there. You have the Google Password Manager. You also have the see, you have LastPass is another one out there. LastPass pretty much is free. It gives you the ability to create those, um, long, lengthy passwords so you don't have to remember facial recognition and that kind of stuff. We'll get into that shortly. Now, once you set strong passwords, you can also look at two-factor authentication, and just as the name implies, gives you the benefit of additional security layer. And so that can be you having your password and maybe a text being sent to your mobile device. You have to make sure for all software that you have that you are updating that on a regular basis. So that way you're keeping up of the most significant version of that software and the device itself. Once those become out of sync and they're a little bit longer to date, it does take a little bit of time to get back to using those. And as you're using them, you want to make sure that the browser sessions that you're using are also safe as well. Because when you update your computer, it also updates the browsers, making it much more secure for you. And so you may want to talk about using more like HTTPS sites and what that the hypertext transfer protocol secure. You also want to avoid using public Wi-Fi. So, for example, if you live in the South, Memphis area, for example, you're probably going to experience Comcast a lot. So you will have Xfinity Wi-Fi that will show up. There's an open um, um, Wi-Fi connection, and what it is that some company around you, if you're, say you're in downtown Memphis, you're at Bass Pro, for example, you want to get online. If you open your laptop, you may see the connection there and the connection for Xfinity Wi-Fi. Well, Xfinity Wi-Fi allows you to use your Comcast login on somebody else's network in order for you to at least get access to the internet at a minimum basis. That doesn't mean that you're going to watch movies. It's just basically used for general web surfing and things like that. You also want to use ad blockers. Chrome has it built in by clicking the lock logo in the browser or URL. You can click that and go to, you can check the button for pop ups and redirects, or you can click on site settings and you can see if it's also blocked there. So that's pretty helpful. Uh, you have to constantly make sure that you are educating yourself, that you're staying informed and up to date with the most secure information that's out there. And this is normally done by cybersecurity professionals because they're looking for new threats, they're looking for best practices and ways to make their organization safe. A standard user in the company is not likely to use these types of devices to provide additional security. It's kind of one of those, if you're interested, you're going to end up researching it and figuring it out. If you're not, don't worry about it. It's just as simple as you just, a lot of times, just want the light to turn on or off. You don't care how much electricity is shooting to there. You just want the end result to be there, and that's fine. Now, aside from looking at the essentials of cybersecurity and privacy measures, one other thing that you want to consider as well are all these different emerging trends that are taking place in the future outlook within regarding technology, which is definitely something that we need. But there is such a evolving part in this whole thing dealing with technology because technology is getting faster, better, and smaller and costing less. So the days of people probably having tons of servers in a data center, they may just have maybe a rack with some things on it. Even for one client that I did a project with, setting up the network Wi-Fi, only have to use a few devices. Everything else is pretty much cloud based, so I didn't have to put like a lot of things in there. But it's basically being able to centralize those kinds of things and look at the relationships between the trends and the technologies themselves. Now, when you're looking at this, you have to take into consideration you have artificial intelligence in cybersecurity, and this is basically has a lot of potential for threat detection and prevention. So if someone is trying to get into your organization, you want to be able to know that before they actually get in and start tearing things up, not at the end of the shift or end of just learning somebody else's in your system. No telling what they probably could have damaged in there. You can also look at privacy and enhancing technologies and these type of advancements in encryption or decentralized systems. So where the traditional Active Directory will be within a facility, and then computers are talking to that, and then back to the computer for an internet. They're just basically just talking about being able to decentralize it, get the data centers reduced down with the actual amount of hardware that they have to support. Because keep in mind that when you're looking at the security aspect, think about walking into a room at your job and you're able to see all the computers. Would you snatch the computers off the wall? Probably not, because you're probably going to get fired. But um, you have to also keep that in mind when you're talking about the threats and detection and prevention. Now, we just have two more points here, and one of them was one that I wanted to talk about briefly, was just privacy enhancing technologies, and those are basically advancements in encryption for decentralized systems again. So we want to make sure that we at least like have that we're able to talk about there. Now, with encryption, that pretty much, for example, if you look at the numbers 1 through 9 and say, if I just called out a number, you would know what the next number is. With encryption, it pretty much mixes all that together. So a single person, it would be impossible for them to try to be able to memorize everything that is on that list there. Now, when we're looking at the overarching aspect of cybersecurity and privacy, There's so much landscape around it with the amount of work that needs to be done. Whether we talk about the artificial intelligence, AI, such as Chat GPT, things like that, as used as artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. And we have to keep in mind that when we're trying to talk about its potential for threat and detection, we have to know by researching online what type of viruses are out there, how long will they be out there, what are some of the remediation steps that we can use to prevent our company from getting these. And you may not always be able to find all the answers, but you're going to be able to find some of the answers as well. Privacy enhancing technologies is another big one. There are some advancements in that to also decentralize the systems and making um, the much more the different technologies that are coming out, make sure that they are abiding by the rules and regulations set to ensure that those are secure. Now, thinking about all those different parts and segments that I discussed, we also want to look at the legislation and regulation because there are departments, um, there are many developments. Sorry, for example, there are many developments in the Data Protection Law and Privacy Acts. So if you're looking at any kind of privacy laws, which in the U.S. they are divided up by a certain number of states, but in Europe it's an overarching rule over everything for all the countries in Europe. So I've always begged to try it in that specific way, such as like the GDPR and stuff like that, trying that a different way like they do there versus what we do here. Now, when you're the overall perspective of me telling you about this is to give you a positive outlook on the future of cybersecurity and data privacy and where it is going. Because if you don't know where it's going, or how can you understand where you're trying to get to if you don't know where you're going? You kind of have to look at the past. You kind of have to look at current and modern day things in regards to cybersecurity and to make sure that you're safe and that you understand what to do if this happened to you. You'll be able to do so now with a better understanding. So, people, that pretty much wraps up today's episode as we talked about one of my very favorite topics, and that is safeguarding the digital world and a deep dive into cybersecurity and data privacy. Look forward to bringing more content to you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as that really helps the channel out so much, people. So, thank you for tuning in, and you all have a great rest of your day, evening, and night, or wherever you are.